Welcome to the podcast. We Do Recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about recovery from addiction.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by High Desert Counseling, Rise Up Supplements, and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
Hot, hot, hot. It is smoking hot down here in the high deserts of southern Utah, where I live, St. George, Utah. Check it out. We've been having some pretty hot days here, Sean, right?
No, not really.
What do you mean, man?
I mean,
I'm like pitting in the studio as we speak.
Comparatively,
well,
dude, July is like tomorrow, and it's barely 100 degrees. Come on, we should be sitting at about 110, 111 right about now.
Very true. Very
so
true.
this is like completely just easy. So I don't know what you're complaining about, man. Pansy.
Well,
Get over it.
You're right. You're right.
Jeez.
Maybe I'm just spending too much time outdoors these days. Speaking of outdoors. Congratulations, everybody. The 4th of July is right around the corner. Super excited for that. Be safe. Be sober. Have a great 4th of July. Make it a memorable one that you'll actually remember the next day. You know what I'm talking about. So thank you guys for listening to this. This is episode 124 of We Do Recover. I'm your host of this thing, Jared Miller. And real quick, this podcast is absolutely free. Its content will always be free. The only thing we ask is for you to keep what you have by giving it away. You know what I'm talking about, right? Share this out with your crazy cousin Carl or whatever other family members you have, with, your coworkers, your friends. Let's just spread a little, message of hope here. So on today's episode, I have the honor of having my guy, one of my buddies. I met this dude out in Warsaw, Indiana, almost a year ago. Matt Traver. Matt's what's going on, man?
Not much, man. I'm just a grateful recovery addict. Happy to be here, man. I'm excited to talk to you. It's long overdue, man.
I know, dude. It's crazy. We're like brothers from other mothers. You're just all the way out there in Wisconsin. How's Wisconsin's weather, since we're talking about weather in the 4th of July?
It's pretty warm for this time of year, but we're getting hit by the smoke from the wildfires. So they're like, stay inside unless you absolutely have to go outside, which is it's kind of weird, but everyone's still just doing what they do. No one's really paying it any mind. Myself,
They don't want you getting Mother Nature's secondhand smoke. Is that what it is?
I guess not. I mean, I was at a fundraiser yesterday, and this guy, he's real allergenic, and it looked like he just got done being pepper sprayed. Like everything, it was just real. Like it's hitting some harder than others. It's crazy.
That's crazy, man. Crazy. Well, I'm glad you're indoors. I'm glad you're staying safe. I don't want you to get Mother Nature's secondhand smoke. Welcome to the podcast. Glad you're on here, man. It's good to reunite with you again. Sounds like we're going to be sharing a stage in a few months upcoming here, and we'll get to all that stuff. Before we get to Matt's story, We Do Recover with Jared Miller is sponsored by High Desert Counseling. High Desert Counseling is a progressive substance abuse treatment facility with a practical approach. They offer day treatment, morning and evening IOP, continuation of care, and Prime for Life programs. Check out their website at highdesert.help or call them at 435-673-2899. That's 435-673-2899. Their facilities are located in St. George and Cedar City, Utah. Episode 124 is also brought to us by Rise Up Supplements. Rise Up Supplements is a nootropic line aimed at optimizing brain function and supporting mental health. They have 2 powerful blends. Mindful Mood helps decrease anxiety and enhance mood. Who couldn't benefit from that? While Mind Shift helps increase focus and optimize brain function. Place your order today at riseupsups.com. That's RISEUPS.com. At checkout, use promo code podcast20 to save yourself 20% off your entire purchase. All right, we got those knocked out. We appreciate both of those organizations sponsoring this podcast. It wouldn't be possible without them. That's how Sean Denovan, our producer, gets paid the big checks, right, Sean? What's your new and good, buddy? Speaking of getting paid big checks.
My wife's motorcycle is fixed. I got to pick it up after the podcast.
Nice.
And then I'm going to say, okay, it's time to learn to ride the bike because we have to be in Sturgis in 1 month. So she's got a month to figure out how to ride a motorcycle and then do the 1,000 miles there and back.
Has she been practicing by turning her blow dryer on hot and just putting it right in front of her face? Like just getting used to that heat that we got down here in the desert?
Well, once we get past Panaca, everything's fine.
Say Panaca five
Panaca.
times fast.
Panaca. Oh, that's right. I messed that one up. That's my new
Well,
one.
cool,
Good.
man. Does she have a Harley? What's she got?
She's got a Honda Shadow.
Nice.
It's chopped and bobbed a little bit, so it looks cool.
It's the Chinese version of Harley.
It's brown. Hey.
Isn't it?
Hey.
Isn't Honda made overseas, or is that Yamaha?
It doesn't matter. You know how much a Harley costs?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. That's why I drive a Honda. Okay. I'm not doing enough of these podcasts to pay for a new Harley.
That's right. We got to crank those up. All right, Matt, let's kick it to you. What's new and good, man? What's going on in your world?
Not much. Just been trying to get to, speaking of motorcycles, my nonprofit Never Give Up is hosting its first annual ever NGU David John Peters motorcycle run in July 29th. So that I'm looking forward to that. It's a lot of people coming out to ride for a good cause. Because Never Give Up not only addresses addiction, but we also address the root causes of addiction, like trauma and PTSD and mental health and things like that. So we're really excited to create awareness about that as well while doing the motorcycle run. We just had our last fundraiser. It was a bags tournament. We're brand new. We're in the foundation stages of our 501c3. If it was a house right now, we just laid the concrete for the foundation, and we're trying to, keep this thing going to open sober living and prison reentry homes.
That is amazing, man. Let's talk a little bit about that since you brought it up. So Never Give Up. I love the title. Mm-hmm. Where did it start? And you've already kind of shared your vision, right? Where you want to go with it. But let's get a little bit of the backlog on that.
All right. Well, April 1st, 2020, right? The day the country got locked down, with the pandemic and everything, when it was officially shut down, at least in the Midwest, it was. My best friend, David John Peters, the founder of Never Give Up, he relapsed the night before. And, I was talking to him, and I went over there, because he was really under the influence of methamphetamine, and he was, paranoid and worried about stuff. And I went there and helped him put together all his electronics. And anyway, I was when he calmed down, I was like, so are you going to go back to, HA and get your white key tag? And he's like, I don't want to give those people anything to talk about. I don't want them to judge me. I don't want to give them, bulletin board material to feel better about themselves. Mm-hmm. And then, I talked him off the ledge, and I calmed him down, and I rewired his heater and, a ceiling fan, everything. And then I went home, and then I went to work the next day, and he's like, bro, I started this Facebook group. It's called Never Give Up. And I'm like, all right, let's do it, man. And then literally 2 hours later, they made the announcement to lock the country down during the pandemic. And then he shared his story of recovery and incarceration. And then the next day I went. And then, with all the craziness going on in the news with the pandemic, and then followed by the George Floyd riots and stuff, it gave people a positive place to come and focus, as a distraction from the uglies in the world. And then from that, because our bread and butter was having people come and share their stories, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I first got into recovery, hearing the things that people had done, in their addiction, not to compare my addiction to anyone else's, but, and then seeing them being happy, joyous, and free from the chains of addiction after hearing what they had done gave me hope. So we figured we would just pay it forward that way. And then we, the Facebook group blew up. Within 2 weeks, we had 2,000, 3,000 members, and it just kept going and going and going. And then we started getting reached out, or, people reaching out to us, from local government agencies, local treatment centers, local, fellowships, to try to really do something positive, make it more than just a Facebook platform. And then that's where the idea of the 501c3 came into play. And then once we did that, because David John Peters was in and out of prison, most of his adult life. And then he did 6 years, the last stretch, and he never got his treatment needs addressed. And then when they let him out, they just let him out with nowhere to go. They're like, here, you figure it out. Mm. And then that's where the idea of sober living and prison reentry homes came from. So that's how that started. And then as the pandemic worsened, more and more people paid attention to us, and then more and more people supported us, because, we were walking the walk, and people were really being helped by this. I still see people, now 3 years later, 3.5 years later, they're like, you guys have no idea what that group did for me and how it helped me get through the pandemic. And, one story I like to share about it is, it's not while it was rooted in addiction, there was one lady that reached out, and she had lost her significant other to cancer, and she had 5 children. And then I met through the group a lady who had 6 kids who lost her significant other to cancer. And then we linked them up and they started like their own online support group, like Widows of Cancer with,
Wow.
and it was just really beautiful, man. Like, and like, just to see it grow from like just an idea and like, as Dave would put it, like a cell phone and a dream to like being what it is today. And, he passed away February 19th of 2021. And then we kept this thing going and we got our 501c3 and now we're just trying to keep it forward and keep his vision alive, keep this thing moving, man.
That's awesome. Isn't it insane how social media, you can reach so many people these days, right? Give them a place to find their tribe, a place to be able to relate and draw strength from. That's fantastic, man. It even sounds like there's been some spin-offs of what you've got going on. So, and everything you described is what this podcast is all about, right? Sharing a story of recovery, not being ashamed or affected by the stigma, getting up and saying, here I am, this is who I am, and in the hopes that it helps somebody else find their path. So speaking of all that, I take it you're a person in long-term recovery yourself, Matt.
Absolutely. On the 4th of July, I'll have 5.5 years absolute sobriety.
That's crazy. Yours is the 4th. Mine's the 3rd. So I'm coming up on 9, but congratulations, man.
No, when I got my 6 months on the 4th of July of 2000. Yeah. And I told my mom, I'm like, yeah, I'm getting my 6-month chip and the city is blowing off fireworks. And she's like, really? Because I'm like, no, Ma, it's just a holiday. But, it's like she was so like amazed that I actually had 6 months at that point, because I had 20 years of just hardcore, 20 plus years of hardcore addiction, and she's seen me just like going in and out of jail and, being homeless multiple times and just like hitting her up for money. So to have 6 months of like absolute sobriety, it meant a lot to her.
Ooh, you just gave us a teaser, Matt. Where does that story begin, my friend?
Well, my story of addiction, it actually begins at an early age, like when in my childhood. I was 6 years old. I'm a survivor of sexual trauma or sexual abuse. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. It's right on the state line in Illinois, but me and my friends were like the kids from Stand By Me. We just like, hung out on the corner, played kickball and, all the things kids do in, small town Midwest. And, like the street lights came on and you went inside. And if your mom had to whistle for you more than twice, then you were going to get it, but,
you didn't want 2 whistles, man. 2 whistles was bad news.
I got 2 whistles. I ran the other way from my house, but
smart man.
Yeah. But, there was I was like 6 or 7 and then there was an older kid that hung out with us. He was like 13, 14 and he was like, come behind the garage. I want to show you something. And, I played with the kid every day. I didn't think nothing of it. And then he put a knife to my throat and told me, I'm going to do what I want to you or I'm going to stab you. And, I realized I thought he was kidding. And then when he pressed it up against my neck, I realized he wasn't. And then at that moment in time, my childhood innocence was just taken from me. You know what I'm saying? I was still a kid, but in my mind, I was just destroyed. I didn't trust anybody and it was real traumatic, obviously. And then it caused me to isolate. And then the way my addiction materialized at that age was through food, because I was just locked in. I was watching cartoons, playing Nintendo, and then I would just eat and eat and eat because I had this secret and I couldn't tell anybody, and
you're isolated and looking for some type of pleasure. And guess what brings us huge amounts of dopamine, sugar, sweets.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just the one thing I felt like I could control and I abused it. And, that was when my addiction really first manifested its ugly disease in my brain. And, by the time I was 10 years old, I was actually wider than I was tall. And I think the biggest I got at 10 years old was 305 pounds or something like that. And, when you're a kid and the neighborhood kids are those nicknames or those names they call you are just brutal. Yeah. And then, it just picked at my self-worth and my self-esteem. So I just stayed in more and I ate more. And my mom was dating this abusive alcoholic. And another thing that really made it worse, but was the first time I experienced anger, because I was afraid a lot, but this was the first time I really wanted to inflict violence on another human being. In the wintertime, back in the 80s, the kids had those moon boots that were, they left man-sized prints in the snow. Well, he came home drunk and he saw big footprints in the snow from, my friends playing in the snow. And he thought my mom like stepped out on him, and we were dirt poor. We didn't have a lot. So she, but we got like a drumstick ice cream cone, and it was like, it was a big deal.
Yeah. That's like,
yeah. And she went to hand it to me, and he just like punched her and knocked her out. And I remember seeing her laying there, and she was like holding the ice cream cone, and as she squeezed it, it like came out of her hands, but she was like out cold, and I just remember that I wanted to kill him, and it went from being afraid all the time. And then from that, I started getting more angry, more violent. And, then one day she just like put everything we had in the car and moved to North Chicago, Waukegan, Illinois, which was like night and day from, the small town of Wisconsin. It was, kind of hood, kind of ghetto. And then I started, again, I'm isolated because, I'm this country kid, moving to the city, and everybody's like a gangbanger, and like, once again, I was just out an outcast and isolated, and I just became more and more shut in, and, and like, I just became shy to where I didn't even talk at all.
Got you. Yeah. That's like, man, the thing I love about what you're sharing right now, Matt, is a lot of people come on and they're like, at 8 years old, I had my first beer, or at 13, I smoked crack for the first time, right? Like, you're sharing the stuff that really kind of led before the substance abuse, where the basement, right? If we hypothetically compare it to building a house like you did earlier with Never Give Up. So, okay. So you moved to the city, right? You're a bigger kid. You feel like a round peg in a square hole.
Absolutely. And then, I got picked on a lot because, I was the only white kid really. I mean, I had some friends, but like I got bullied a lot. I got, I get jumped a lot after school, a lot. And then one day I was walking home and I saw like these two kids beating up this other little kid. And I like, I was the same size I am basically now, a little shorter, but, and I don't like bullies. So I just like pushed them off, and the kid that I helped got up and like flipped me off. He's like, I didn't need your help or whatever. But he ran away, and I didn't think nothing of it. And my mom was working, 3 jobs or 2 jobs. She was never home. She was just trying to make ends meet. And all of a sudden there was a knock on my door, and I opened the door, and like the scariest dude I've ever seen in my life, anyway, it was his like neighborhood to run. And what I didn't realize is that the kid I helped was like his little brother. And then he like walks in my house and he's like, do you want to make some money, man? And I'm like, sure. And then, so he had me like on the corner looking out for him, and then he'd give me money, and, and then that was the first time I realized like the, power and respect that came with like the dope game. I didn't do drugs yet. I didn't, sell them yet, but I was just out there posted up, being a part of a drug dealing syndicate, if you want to call it that, or, just, the criminal element.
Right.
And, and then like, as I got through, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, my mom decided she wanted to move back to Wisconsin. And then it was, right around where that other small town was, but the guy was gone and all this stuff. And, but at this point I'm wearing like Jinkos and big hoodies and like Timberlands, cause I'm blending into my environment out there. And, so I moved back, my freshman year of high school, and everybody's got cowboy hats and big belt buckles. And then here I am in like, Timberlands and hoodies, just straight out of the hood type stuff. And, so once again, I'm an outcast. I'm isolated, and I'm just keeping to myself because I don't really vibe with these people, and they're calling me names and, just picking on me. And, and then I made friends with one of the kids, local farmer kid, and he invited me to a keg party. And then I had my first beer, and
what age is this?
This is 14 years old.
14. Okay.
And then, once I had my first beer, I loosened up right away. And then I'm like, I wasn't quiet. I wasn't shy anymore. I'm talking to everybody. I'm making jokes, and like, it was the thing I was looking for my whole life. So I thought like alcohol was my solution. I'm like, this is it, man. I finally feel at peace. I finally feel like comfortable in my own skin. And then we started drinking before school, and, drinking during school, and then just not going to school. And then, I was realizing that like my drinking was getting out of hand. So a buddy of mine introduced me to marijuana, and I started smoking marijuana. And then once again, it was like what I was looking for my whole life. I wasn't sloppy drunk, stumbling around. I was just like chill.
Right.
And, it was just, it was just a different type of vibe, but I like that. So I really stuck to weed. And then, I started selling weed and, doing things like that. And, it just progressed from there, and then my sophomore year, it became acid. And then my junior year, it became mushrooms. And then like my senior year, it became Molly. And as I, went through my high school career, so my drug career escalated as well. And like every summer it was something new, and every summer I thought I found exactly what I was looking for.
Right.
And
right. You started doing the cross addiction thing, right? Yeah. Would you say at the time though it was more recreational, or do you feel like you had an addiction and it was a dependency at that point? Right? Because like one thing that's a common theme is a lot of people are in that curious stage in their adolescence, right? Junior high, high school, whatever it may be, early college. There is a definite difference between recreational or experimental versus like chemical dependent.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, like the first 2 months, because it would always start at the beginning of summer or something new, but by the end of the summer, it was not recreational at all. Like, the first couple of weeks of summer, I was like, yeah, we should do that next weekend, and then next thing I know, I'm taking acid every day. And then, my junior year, I'm taking mushrooms every day, in August. And, my senior year, I'm eating ecstasy every day, like they're Tic Tacs. And, how the disease progresses.
Right.
It just, because between my parents, the addiction gene was in both of them. My real dad was, huge into cocaine, and he went to prison forever. Like I didn't really know him. And, my mom, she's not like that now. And I never really saw her like that. But before me, I heard she was, doing her fair share of partying and stuff. So,
and that's something that I don't think enough people touch on, is that genetic component. Up to 60% of people that their parents or somewhere in the line of genealogy who's had an addiction, it puts them at a higher risk, right? Like a 60% higher risk that they will develop some type of substance use disorder, AKA addiction, if we don't want to sound like clinical, you know what I mean? But a lot of people don't know that. They don't know that. Like it blows them away when they hear that, and they're like, oh man, because oftentimes, I don't know if you were ever this way kind of, and we're going to get into your story of recovery in the second half of this, but when they get into that stage of like the recovery, I can remember I would always think like, why did this happen? Right? Like I couldn't, before I even knew what was going on, I was already dependent before I realized that I couldn't stop, right? Powerless is kind of the principle or the concept. Was that the case for you, or what did that look like?
No, absolutely. Once I tried something new, I like within a week or two, I was powerless over it, because it was just, it was a temporary solution to my permanent problems, that went unaddressed, and I tell people this all the time, like the sexual trauma, like once I got into IOP later, and we'll get into that later, I almost forgot about the sexual trauma until I did my timeline or my lifeline. And I started going backwards at all the, the life-changing events. And I'm like, holy shit, I got assaulted as a kid, but because like, I just wanted, like I was running away from something, but it got so bad as my disease progressed, I wasn't sure what I was running from anymore, or what I was trying to get away from. And it turns out it was this thing that happened to me at 6 years old,
Man, I just got the biggest smile on my face if you could see it, because like, I'm excited to get to that in the next minute and a half. Because a lot of people, that's exactly it, right? Like trauma does something to our memory where it suppresses it and it tries to protect you by kind of keeping you from it. And especially like when we're shutting down our frontal cortex and we're not able to think, and it shuts down that memory system in our brain. So it makes sense when you kind of started getting clean, it started coming back online, and you're all of a sudden like, ding, right? Light goes off. Goes off. We got about a minute left here, Matt. So eventually, is that kind of all the substance use, or because I want to be able to leave enough time for your story of recovery? You're doing some cool stuff these days.
No, and then like after, like the summer after high school, I tried cocaine, and then, I moved to Minnesota, and then when I was 22, I tried methamphetamine for the first time. And then a couple of years later, I got into opiates, and then towards the end of my addiction, the last 10 years of it, up until I was 38 years old, I was doing methamphetamine and heroin every day. I would do heroin in the morning if I went to bed, just so I could get well enough so I could go steal. And then I would do meth to, motivate me to do more spiritually sick things, to feed my addiction.
It's a vicious cycle of gas pedal and brake, gas pedal and brake, gas pedal and brake, right?
Absolutely. Like all my mug shots, I like if one eye's popped wide open, the other one's like real little. It's like half of me. But I'm sure I'm having some medical.
Yeah, we'll be right back after this short little mention from our sponsor. We're going to get Matt's rock bottom and his story of the climb after this short little 30-second break. We'll see you in a second.
You are listening to We Do Recover with Jared Miller and co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. We'll be right back after this short break with more of We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Brought to you by High Desert Counseling, Rise Up Supplements, and the Hilton Garden Inn.
High Desert Counseling is an adult outpatient substance abuse treatment facility. We offer multiple services including day treatment, morning and evening intensive outpatient services, continuing care, and Prime for Life. What makes us different is our emphasis on gathering all of the information before enrollment. We do this by offering a thorough evaluation by a credentialed professional. Once we have committed to you and you have committed to us, don't worry, insurance will not dictate your treatment. Lastly, the pretzel effect. We are a brief intervention where we connect our clients to community, mental health, and medical professionals to help maintain recovery for life after treatment. At High Desert Counseling, we strive to be the bridge from active addiction to recovery, community, and connection.
We welcome you back to We Do Recover with Jared Miller, co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers.
Brought to you by High Desert Counseling, Rise Up Supplements, and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
And now with part 2 of our podcast, Jared Miller and Dr. Terry Sellers.
We are back, baby. Unfortunately, Dr. Terry Sellers couldn't join us today because he came down with some kind of tummy bug, some kind of flu or something like that. He wasn't feeling too great, but we wish him the best.
I think that was the 85 and an 80 bug that he usually gets, or the 95 and the 80 bug that he usually gets.
Driving insanely too fast?
Oh, no. That's not what I was implying at all. No, not at all.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he totaled another car. I don't know. Anyways, we wish him the best.
Maybe he totaled another car?
He texted us back.
What?
So he's totaled some cars, man. He's kind of a crazy driver. I don't think that's the case, though, because he bought one of those cars that, like, drives for him now. Anyways, we wish him the best. Hopefully he gets feeling better. Welcome back. Episode 124. We got Matt Traver here, and we are rocking and rolling. Matt has shared that he, started off, had some unfortunate events happen to him in his childhood. Obviously, like a lot of us in high school, started graduating from one substance to another. Ultimately, it led to the point where he was using methamphetamine and heroin on a daily basis, full-blown addiction dependency. If you're listening to this, most likely you know what we're talking about. Before we get back to Matt, episode 124 is brought to us by the Hilton Garden Inn. It is always sunny and bright at the Hilton Garden Inn in St. George, Utah. If you're traveling through southern Utah, give them a Google search. Just type in Hilton Garden Inn, St. George, Utah. They have amazing amenities. The place is always clean, spectacular, great customer service. We appreciate them sponsoring this podcast. Matt, you left us on kind of a cliffhanger there. It was a build-up. So, look, man, first and foremost, thank you for being vulnerable to share some of the stuff that you've shared. Not a lot of people would be willing to do that, and that's incredible. I don't know if you're like me, but when I first started getting into this recovery thing and the treatment thing and the gel thing, I wasn't talking about my stuff, right? Because I was afraid you were going to use it as a weapon against me, or I was afraid somehow that made me less of a man, or I was afraid, right? All those fears. And then I got hit with the 10 myths of manhood. Boom.
Yeah.
Right? Dang, that assignment opened my eyes to what a real man looks like. So I just appreciate you being a real man, coming on here, sharing your stuff in hopes that if somebody out there has gone through something like that and they're currently, trying to escape from the traumas that they've experienced through substances, they can look at you and go, man, maybe I can reach out to Matt. If this dude has been able to do it, so can I. So let's get back to that story. So the build-up active addiction looked pretty messy, right? What is it? Where was kind of your rock bottom?
My rock bottom, I had to beat a meth lab case in Jefferson County, Wisconsin. The cops on my case at the time were embezzling money from other investigations, so they had to throw a bunch of evidence out, except for me buying my own Sudafed. And then
can I just pause you right there? Matt,
Yeah.
you were in pretty deep, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
You just said I beat a methamphetamine, say that, a methamphetamine production case, right? Like,
Yep, meth lab. First functioning lab in Jefferson County's history. And when the judge sentenced me to a year, she looked at the detectives and was like, it makes me sick to my stomach that I can only sentence Mr. Traver to a year, because my first offer was 18 years in and 18 years out. I wouldn't be here. I'd still be there, actually. And, I did my time, and I got off probation, and I had a choice. I can either move to Green Bay or I can move to Miami. And what kept me here is because I was still in active addiction. If I, because I was still, right outside Madison, I'm like, well, if I need to get dope, it's only a 2-hour drive. I didn't want to be in Miami, far away from drugs where I didn't know anybody. So that's one instance where being an addict actually saved my life in long term.
do you ever look back and just go like, thank you, HP, thank you, higher power, right? Like, dude, when you just shared, I would still be in there today. Like, I felt sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
that's insane, man. Okay, sorry, I didn't
100%.
mean to cut you off.
No, you're all good, man. So I came to Green Bay, and I quit doing a lot of hard drugs. I mean, I was still doing heroin here and there. And then, I got my place, and I got, a good job, and, and then things were going really well. So I'm like, we should celebrate. So we went to Milwaukee and got a bunch of heroin. And then the next day, and then I started selling heroin in Green Bay. Long story short, I started getting in, networking with the wrong types of people in Green Bay. And I started getting all these little ticky-tack charges, like I would get caught with a needle or, a cotton ball, and then I wouldn't go to court. And then I got evicted from the apartment. And then I was on the run basically for about 14 months, I think, or something like that, just missing court dates. And then I got picked up. And then they wanted to offer me 6 years in and 6 years out for all the things that I missed. And I was like, it's like paraphernalia tickets. They're like, well, they're real pissed about you beating that meth lab case. So they offered me heroin treatment court, and I never heard of it. And I was still in it really bad in active addiction. So the lawyer was telling me all the rules and stuff. And he's like, well, they'll let you out. And that's all I needed to hear. I'm like, they'll let me out. He's like, yeah, but you got to do stuff to stay out. And I'm like, okay, bro, whatever you say, just let me out of here. And then I was on bond, because they let me out, but I had a warrant in another county, and then they just let me out. And then I came back to Green Bay to turn myself into Green Bay, for treatment court. And then a buddy of mine was running the streets, and he gave me, 2 ounces of meth when I touched down. And he's like, don't you got to go to treatment court? I'm like, not anymore, dude. And then I was out ripping and running, and then I got an OWI. And then someone showed up to my hearing that day from Green Bay and was like, listen, if you don't turn yourself in tomorrow, we're going to throw you, we're going to make sure you get 6 years in prison. So I went in the next day and I turned myself in. And because I didn't technically start the program, they couldn't kick me out, which was the weirdest loophole. But again, it was my higher power at work. And what led to all this was like someone setting me up initially, 14 months ago. And I remember when I first got sober, I was like so mad at him. Like, if I ever see that dude, but now that I look back at it with a clear mind, a sober mind, it was the best thing that could ever happen to me, because if he doesn't do that, I don't get into, treatment court, and I'm probably either in prison for a long time or dead, and then I was doing real well in treatment court. Actually I was not yet, I was doing just enough to get my papers signed and, stay out of jail. I was half-assing it. When you're an addict, bro, we suck at moderation. We have to be all in or not at all. And so I was out in the real world, free, but I was still doing time in my head because I hadn't addressed any of the symptoms of my disease. And then I had about 42 days of sobriety, and I was living with this girl who was still using, and, for the lack of a better word, she was beating the hell out of me, man. I was in a battered spouse, and I'm not, I'm being totally serious here, and it got to the point where I was going to IOP and they were giving me domestic violence pamphlets and go, does any of this stuff apply to you? And the only thing they didn't was about being pregnant. I'm like, holy shit, man, I'm a battered spouse. And so I made it through Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And then on January 2nd, she was just on one, and she was hitting me and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I give up. I'm just going to kick myself out of the program, go to prison, but I'm not going to be sober when I do it. And I went and used drugs, and I called my probation officer, told her I got high, and she's like, come in today. And I'm like, I'm not coming in today. I'm not sitting in a little box today. I'm too under the influence for that. But the next day I turned myself in, and they gave me a week sanction. And then we're going to put me on the ankle bracelet. And then the day before they were going to let me out, I crossed paths with that person that gave me methamphetamine, when I came back. And he was, I know a lot of people from using, but this guy was like my actual friend. And then he got laid down for 20 years. And then we were passing in the hallway, and he's like, dude, they laid me down for 20 years. You're too good for this, man. Stop doing what you're doing. You deserve better. And then I went back to my unit. He went back to his unit, and they locked down the jail, and we didn't know what was happening or whatever. And then the next morning when we were in our cells and they were sliding us our food, they're like, his name was Christopher McConney. He went in his cell and hung himself. And I was like, was I the last person he spoke to? Was that the last thing he said to anybody? And I'm in my cell, I'm looking at my little nasty tray, and I'm listening to my cellmate tell me what a big baller he is on the street. And jail's got that smell, and I'm looking at all the the beige walls, and I'm like, dude, there's no way my story ends like this. This is not the last place I'm going to see. So they let me out, and I went to a meeting, and I had a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of remorse, because I gave my mom 42 days of hope. I gave my son 42 days of hope. And I was like literally in the middle of texting my drug dealer because I just wanted to die. I didn't want to, no accountability. I just wanted to end it all. And this lady, I never, I've seen her around, but I didn't know her. And she must have saw what I was doing. She like points for me to sit back down. I'm like, yes, ma'am, and my drug dealer left. And she asked me how I was doing. And I told her I fell off, and she like gave me a hug. And I just remember that hug she gave me like was life-saving. Like I needed that, like someone just to show me that they cared and they loved me. And after that, I pushed all my chips in the middle of the table of recovery. I went 1,000%, 100 miles an hour, whatever, metaphor you want to use. And I would, at this point, I'm living at the Oxford Sober Living House, and I quickly became president. And then that really helped me in my recovery because it helped me hold others accountable, and then it taught me how to keep myself accountable as well. And then, I'm just killing it in drug court. Like I'm helping, pick up garbage, and like, I'm going to meetings and I'm sharing and I'm talking about like the things I'm sharing with you right now. And it was truly freeing. And then I was working, my steps with a sponsor in NA, and he was, I was working with him for about 9 months. And then he messaged me one day and he's like, sorry, man, I can't be your sponsor. And then, I started freaking out. I'm like, what did I do, man? And he's like, no, I've been using drugs this whole time. And I'm like, holy shit. And I remember like just thinking like, so is everything I learned from this guy or everything he suggested, I'm like, is this all nonsense? Is he just instruct me in a bad way? But, I look back and and that was one of the things I learned most from him, that anyone's susceptible to this disease, no matter what. Because he was going into like jails and institutions and speaking, he was, going around like we do with Bridge the Gap and things like that, just sharing his story. But the whole time he put his mask back on, and, that made, I'm not grateful that he fell off, but it was the reminder I needed.
Yeah. It reminds you that people that you put on a pedestal, or that, you know what I mean? They're human too. It can happen too. There's a saying that I love, especially working in this field, is get close enough to the fire to enjoy the warmth. Don't get too close to where you get burnt. You know what I mean? Because when you're hearing people talk about whoop-de-whoop, I picked up people, places, things, if you get too close to that fire, you will get burnt, right? So it's like when you, and listen, this is for anybody in recovery, like when you're doing service work, you're going to these fellowship meetings, you're giving back, it's a lifestyle. And when you're in the lifestyle, that's fantastic. But you also got to be realistic and know that you need to set some boundaries, because otherwise you're going to get too close to the fire and you're going to get burnt. And it happens to people, especially some people that are doing the most. You know what I mean? Because they're hearing the most, they're exposed to the most. Like we walk around people and we try to pull them out of active addiction. Well, guess what that means? That means we're getting pretty close to that fire. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate you sharing. And it's crazy. Like I'm hearing like the dun 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 dun, like the Rocky comeback song. You know what I mean? Sounds like you're kind of coming back from all this stuff, which is beautiful, man. Where does it go from here?
And then, I'm at Sober Living. And I'm about to graduate drug court, and I got my first apartment, my own place, with my own money, legally and all that stuff. And, I got my car, my license, and I basically got all the boxes checked, to be a responsible member of society. And then I graduated drug court, and, it was just like for, 6 months, it was like, now what, and then, I was going to the gym and, things like that, and going to meetings and sharing, but I wasn't really, I got, like, cause when you go up for a while, you kind of can like plateau off or taper off for a while. So I'm like, now what?
The pink cloud bursts. Did your pink cloud burst?
Yeah. It was just, it just got stagnant, cause I was doing everything that everyone else was doing. And then on New Year's Eve of 2020, that's when I met David John Peters, the founder of Never Give Up. And he just got he was at Jackie Nitschke Center in Green Bay, and he came with a bunch of people from the center at this function in a small town in Wisconsin. And it was super weird because like the whole town was like flooded, and then ice like flooded off like 90% of the roads except for the one road to this church where the function was. So for him and me to be there, it was just our higher power working, as well, and I remember seeing him come in because he was, he's 6'9", and he had a Vikings jersey on in Minnesota, and I'm from Minnesota too. And we live in Green Bay. So like, obviously I'm like, are you really a fan? And, and so we bonded right there.
Relatability right off the bat, right from the Vikings jersey.
Absolutely. Yeah, and, shade from like Green Bay people about my Vikings stuff, but I'm like, if it wasn't for the Vikings, this group might not be here, man. So, but,
how many years ago was that?
That was, New Year's Eve of 2000, going into 2020. So January 1st, 2020, so 2019. And, and then we start, and I was kind of helping him navigate, the recovery waters, because like when he walked in that room, he had the same look that I had. Like,
oh yeah,
why are these people being so nice to me? What do they want from me? This is weird. I remember thinking all that same stuff. I'm like, dude, it's cool, man. Everybody just wants to help you. Don't question it. Just accept it. And he's like, really? And, and then he started, getting active in his own recovery, and he got out of the Nitschke house. He got his own apartment, and, he had his slips and his falls, but, the beginning of Never Give Up, the night before he relapsed, and, he called me because he trusted me, and, I helped him through it. And, and then like in his desperation, at the bottom, his bottom, when he felt, he knew exactly what an addict like himself needed. And that's where Never Give Up was formed. A judgment-free zone where you can come and talk about anything without ridicule, without harassment, without politics, without all that stuff. And that's, one thing I'm really proud of the Never Give Up Facebook group anyway. Like in the beginning, there was like spammers and, 13 steppers and like, but like for the most part, we do a really good job of keeping it just about what you're struggling with or what you're celebrating today, And again, it just, day one, man, it just took off. And, he's, he really started this amazing thing, and I'm really honored and proud that I get to help see this thing keep going, and like I said, it was a Facebook group that gave people an escape from the uglies of the world in 2020 and, going into 2021. And, we were really on our way to do big things, but, life doesn't care about your plan. He succumbed to heart failure at 38 or 39 years old. He wasn't taking care of himself. That was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with sober, and I remember because of like the social media aspect, and we had such, a big following. Like I remember I had to take 10 feet, from my bedroom to my bathroom, and it took me 2 hours because my phone just kept dinging. Like, what happened to Dave? What happened to Dave? And I just, and I shut down, and I didn't want to use drugs, but I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to, acknowledge any, I was just in a bad spot, but that's, with my best friend being gone, but he left me this amazing group of people to show me support and love at my darkest time, and I'm truly grateful and blessed for that, and like just to be able to keep this thing going. And, we had a lot of obstacles to overcome, not just COVID and trying to find like places to, have functions and things like that, and not with all the uglies in the world, but, like trying to get our 501c3. And we had all these people trying to come on board just to say they were on board, but not really do anything. And that's fine, but, the real ones remain. And we're trying to do this thing. And I'm just like truly honored and blessed, like if it wasn't for that group, I'm not here talking to you today. I would have never been at Bridge the Gap, sharing my story there and meeting people like yourself. And Pastor Pat and Drew and Joe and, Higgy and, all the, I forget who else was there at this moment, Brittany and James Smith, and it's just like, this is what recovery is, man. I'm truly just like in awe of what like my life has become in, the last 5.5 years. Like I have bad days, but like the things in, when I have a beautiful day, it makes it that much more beautiful, and it's because of recovery. I'm not perfect, like I have rough, goes and, sometimes just things don't go my way, but I can accept that today, like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. I love it. It's beautiful. That's a message of hope right there. You know what I mean? That is a message of hope. You touched on one concept that I kind of want to feel for a sec, just because it baffles me. It like blows me away. And I'm going to be a hypocrite because I'm sure I was the same way. But like, so like I'm notorious for in process group, if the card comes to you, right, the feelings card, and you look at it, you're supposed to pick a feeling and then talk to us about why you feel that way, the thoughts, right? And then the whole group gets involved in the share, and it's that support, that safe, that group conscience. We're moving out of small mind into big mind, all the therapeutic stuff. And sometimes I'll have these people that get referred from the justice system that'll join, right? And it's fine, right? I was one of those people. And they'll say pass. And I'm like, nope. And they like look at me like, well, I ain't sharing in here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, then you don't have to be in here. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, cool. I'll let your PO know that you're leaving. And it like, they don't get it, right? Now, let me rewind now that I've said that. I'm not trying to make anybody sound bad because I was this guy. It's funny, man, how our mentalities change. I remember when I went to jail and I was on, drug-related charges. Man, I was writing my judge. I was praying every day to get into treatment. Like, please, God, please judge, please PO, send me to treatment. Don't give me prison, right? Like, give me a program over prison. And I was all about it. You know what I mean? And then I get into a program and I'm like, no, I ain't doing it. This is dumb. This is lame, right? Like this mentality blows me away. It's like that. How dare you help me improve my life mentality? I don't get it, but yet we do it. And one of the coolest things that I've seen is when that defiance hits a hard obstacle, right? Like when you say, nope, you're in here. It's a gift to be in here. You don't have to be here. And if you're going to be in here, you're going to contribute, you're going to share. And to watch the transformation of that breakdown of ego. And I've seen some dudes that got tats from head to toe and they're about that life, just completely take off the mask and really just let people love them and like let the whole recovery environment embrace them. And that is what keeps me going, dude. Like, that and connecting with people like you. And so anyways, I went off on a tangent there, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about because it's just, and I get it. I was that guy, you know what I mean? Until I realized like that concept of like, wait a minute, I asked to be here. You know what I mean? Like I was desperate to be here, so I might as well get something out of it. So talk to me. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, when I first started IOP, I went like to 4 groups and I didn't say a word. And then the counselor, this guy, I can't say his name because of HIPAA or whatever, but he's like, you got something to say today? I'm like, nope. And he put me in a chair in the corner and then he had everyone in the group or in the room tell me something that, about myself. And then like, they just let me have it. And I remember I was going to throw a chair at this guy, but like, that was one of those moments where he's like, you got to hear what your peers think of you, because they're in here trying to do better. And when you come in here, all stone faced, just staring at the ground, looking at the clock. It's disrespectful to people trying to do better, that. But like, I needed that dose of humility, not humiliation, but that humility, because like, when we're in the dope game, when we do like all this sinister stuff or whatever, we think we're like these bad mamma jammas. And then like, when we get broke down like that, it's really humbling and it makes us like rethink everything we thought we knew. I'm like, I used to be a bad dude. I used to pack pistols and now I got a bunch of people in the classroom insulting me. What the hell just happened?
It really does. It makes you question that programming, right? Because we all come in with programming. We all have programming from our childhood, from our drug use years, from our jail time. We have all this programming that we have to challenge. We have to take a look at that programming and go, why? Why do I still hold on to this stuff? And if I want different, first of all, I have to know better to do better. But if I want different, I have to be willing to change that programming. You know, so
Absolutely.
again, I love it, right? Like here's Matt. He hits a hard object, that counselor, and then he just kind of diffuses and starts, you know what I mean? I can just see it like a chart in my head. It's beautiful. We got 2 minutes here, Matt. I know that you're doing some cool things. Talk to me real quick about Woo Shoes. I know that's a passion for you. I see you on social media doing the Woo Shoe thing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's just a business I started because I love shoes, and I remember as a kid, I had an aunt who would kind of spoil me from every time, you know, because my mom would always give me like Payless shoes that would fall apart anyway. But with the first pair of Jordans I got, you know, I held my head up. I was like, yeah, I had a little swag, you know. And then at the second Never Give Up meet and greet, there was these kids that Dave looked after, and their parents don't do they're not financially stable or, you know, doing the best, I should say. And I got them 2 pairs of Jordans, you know, each. And I remember they had that same look that I had, you know, and and then I got an inheritance from my real dad passing. I didn't know him, but I'm like, how can I take this money and do some good with it? And that's what I did. I invested in a bunch of shoes, and I take some of the profits from the shoes to donate shoes to a needy kid once a month. Like last month, I did one for Father's Day. We did one for Mother's Day. It's just, you know, because I love shoes, so it's not really work for me. You know what I mean? It's just something I'm passionate about. And,
Bro, who doesn't
you know,
love shoes?
I
love shoes too, man. Right? Like you should see my closet. I'm competing with my wife on the shoe shelf. You know what I'm saying? I get it, man. I get it. That's awesome.
Bad.
We got about 30
but
seconds. 30 seconds left here, Matt. I just want to let you know, dude, you're like a beacon all the way from Wisconsin. And I hope that my light's as bright as your beacon here in St. George, Utah. But man, like again, I just got a lot of love and a lot of gratitude for you, bro.
Yeah, you too, man. I really appreciate this.
Keep on keeping on with that. Never give up and helping people, and just keep being a symbol of hope. Thanks for being on this podcast, buddy.
My pleasure, man.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for joining us today on We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Help us spread our message of hope. Like, comment, and share.
If you have any topics or ideas for future shows, please share that on our Facebook page.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening.
Brought to you by High Desert Counseling, Rise Up Supplements, and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of its sponsors. This has been a production from A Podcast Studio.